Hi, everybody. Welcome back to this show. And today we have Millie America, who is an author and metaphysical facilitator. And when I opened up Millie's newest book called Erasable and I started reading it, I literally felt like I was in the middle of a Stephen King novel. I mean, it starts off with an absolute bang, and you're just wondering, like, what is going on? I remember my daughter coming and getting me for dinner, and I'm still in this book. I'm like, oh, yeah, just give me a minute, just give me a minute. I'm wanting to find out like what's going to happen, what's going to happen. It was really intense. And as you go through it, and we talk about this in the interview today, but Millie's had an absolutely unbelievable life, and she's had a major bout of amnesia for like 20 years. She's had a couple of near-death experiences, and all of this, she has found a way to bring meaning and different lessons and insights to all of us through her life's experiences. Today, we talk about much of this, and I think one of the most important ones being the concept of waking up, or as she says, waking up to our spirituality, or this concept of awakening. And that a lot of times that can even be confused for mental illness, and that we can even actually create mental illness if we are not answering that sort of call and what that actually means. And she goes through her own personal experience dealing with that as well. We talk about intuition and the difference between maybe what we think intuition is and what sometimes our intuition is actually calling us to do. She talks about the importance of really living our life from that place of authenticity of who we really are and answering from that place. And she shares so many insights from what she learned from the other side and coming back. And she is a medium as well and is able to connect with all sorts of different spirits that have crossed over to the veil and insights that she's brought from that, key messages that a lot of times these loved ones from the other side want us to know on this side. So a really fascinating episode, and I think there's so much really juicy nuggets in there for us to incorporate into our lives. So I hope you guys all really enjoy this episode. One other thing we have here that we're so excited to share is that we are now live on the Inspire Life Multiversity platform that we have been wanting to create. So if you go to Inspire Health Podcast and click on courses, you'll see Inspire Life Multiversity, the higher education you really need online courses. And Taya and my goal with this is we want to make the education that you guys are receiving through the podcast to make it very tangible and practical and doable so you can actually see the changes take place in your life. And so we have a couple of courses that we've put together that we'll be launching, and the first one is going to be the Nature Care Solutions Reclaim Your Power to Heal that I will be doing this month. So if you haven't already, make sure you come to the website there, scroll down to here, Nature Care Solutions, just say, yes, I'd like to be the first to know. From there, you will get on the wait list, and then we will send information to you as soon as it is being released. This is going to be a live comprehensive 8-week course. And this is going to be a beta launch, so I am going to be doing it live with you. I want to be able to field questions. I want to be able to go through all of this with you, and this will be at a cost point that will be lower than what it will normally be at because this is going to be a live course where I am going to be working through all of this together and getting some of your feedback as we go along. I think it's going to be phenomenal. It's going to teach so much of the stuff that I do with my family so that you guys can have those same skill set. What we're going to be doing down the road is we're going to be partnering with different guests that we've really enjoyed conversations with that we think have amazing messages. And then we're going to be creating more and more of these different courses. So Nature Care Solutions is the first one. There's going to be another one that I'm putting together called the 30-Day Metaphysics Detox. So sign up for that too. And we'll send out information on that. We are going to be having a lot of cool content coming out over the course of this year. So stay tuned. The best way is to get on the wait list. And if you're on the wait list, you will likely be privy to free giveaways and bonuses that will only be to the people that are on the wait list. So go and check that out and sign up. And I hope you guys enjoyed this episode with Millie. It was an absolute delight to be able to discuss everything and talk with her. So thanks so much for all of your support. Get on the wait list there and let us know your thoughts. But we're really excited for this Inspire Life Multiversity. I think it's going to be a phenomenal support for everybody over the course of the next several years. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Inspire Health podcast. And we are continuing on with the series Life, Death, and Beyond, Exploring Our Greater Reality. And we have Millie America with us today. And Millie is a metaphysical facilitator, intuitive empath, author of several books that we will get into. She's the founder of Sacred Journey Inward, a daily blog where she shares stories of humanity focused on love and growth. At an early age, Millie tuned into spirit and had encounters that were mistaken for mental illness and possession. In her 30s, an accident caused her to have amnesia, and later in life, a severe health crisis caused her to have a near-death experience that opened her up to even further the awareness of other dimensions. Millie is an Amazon best-selling author for her collaboration in You, Empathy, You, an anthology and guidebook for empaths. Millie's newest book is the story of tragedy to triumph, Erasable, which was, I think, just recently released now, right, in January 2023. And Millie, believe it or not, is the mother of 8 children and lives in the magical mountains of Western North Carolina. Millie, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you both for having me. I'm so excited about this.
I think this will be really fun. I mean, everybody we've spoken to on this series, I think, just adds another layer to it. And when we came across your work, we thought you'd be a perfect fit for here as well. And I'd love to share your story. Where we could start with, when you mentioned you're a metaphysical facilitator, for people that aren't too familiar with that, can you explain what you mean by the metaphysics and sort of the ability to facilitate people from that sort of groundwork?
I had to use a word that wasn't so, because psychic, I mean, I'm psychic, but I don't, for whatever reason, because of the way that I was grown up and my mother couldn't deal with the fact that I had all this intuition, um, being psychic was always it's my thing. It's actually nobody else's, but it's my own trigger. And it's not even anymore. So I started calling myself a metaphysical facilitator, meaning anything that's metaphysical or high consciousness or anything that anybody is struggling with, I help facilitate those parts of them. Because a lot of times, because of the way that this generation is a lot more aware and open, but generations past still have that idea that this is witchy or is evil or whatever. So when you use the word metaphysical, it sounds more science and guided than to say psychic. And once they can use whatever label, it's just a label. But I feel that when I sit with somebody, I'm actually just tuning into another realm. So it is very metaphysical. So it's just a label that changes the frequency of what people think, oh, another psychic or another witch. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, I actually really like the term metaphysics. I think it's come up a fair bit over the last while, and I when we talk about it, I often think of it that I like the idea where it's like we generally think that our reality is just based on what we perceive through the 5 senses, and that really is what we generally think our reality is, and we don't even realize that we are influenced by all of these other layers and frequencies and dimensions that make up our absolute reality. And to me, the only thing that really gives it justice is when we use the term metaphysics, it's working beyond the physical, beyond the physics, into all of these other layers. And I think that's something that's starting to come into focus a little bit more to people's awareness that we are much more than this, and we're sort of aware that there's a lot of different layers to who we are and the things that actually impact our reality here on earth and actually supersede it, I would say, in most cases, as far as what actually happens here. So I think it's actually incredibly important to work on all of those different layers, because they're the parts that are it's like bringing the unseen to become seen again, right?
love that. And that really is what the metaphysics science is. It's about being out of ourselves, getting out of the way, and using the universe and consciousness, which never dies. So I think it's one of those words and terminology that is becoming more streamlined right now. And people are able to go, okay, this is not just a woo-woo thing. This is actually a science. I mean, you're seeing it everywhere. I mean, we're in the best times of our lives when it comes to intuition and, health and mind, body, and spirit. It's just, I'm excited to see what your children and my young ones are going to do with all this information, and everything is just out there. Shows or more. I mean, look at that. What is it? That show Manifest. I don't know if you've seen the show Manifest, which is about it. it blew my mind that something like that has now come on Netflix or Hulu. So if you get a chance, watch it. It's about a plane that gets lost for 5 years or 3 years or something like that, or 6 years. And it has all this metaphysical stuff that it's now common conversations at the dinner table. So
Hmm. Yeah, the conversations are definitely changed over
yeah.
the years from the conversations that I would have had with my parents and that my parents would have had with my grandparents. They're definitely different conversations.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of that, Millie, can you share a little bit more about your childhood and what that was like?
Rough. It was rough. Which is funny. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico. And my mother was a single mother. She was 44 when I came along. I have sisters that are one's 24 years older than me, the other one's 15 years older than me. So they were out of the house by the time the middle one had gotten married at 15. So my father was nowhere to be seen. And um, my mother was extremely psychic, but it was very different times. It was in the late 60s, early 70s, and she's raising me alone. And I started having conversations with beings that weren't there, dead people. And when I told her, she kept telling me, you can't have those conversations. You can't do this, And I kept having them alone in the room. So then she took me to therapy and she took me to a psychiatrist. And then she took me to a spiritualist group on the other side of the island. And what they did was they tried to exorcise me by removing any bad spirits that were in me that were causing me to have these delusions. And at the time, for a young child, 6 or 7, to have women spit rum in her face or have twigs hit you in the back and chant and get this, I realized at that very moment, after that night, that I had to just stop. Whatever this was no good, and I was not going to entertain it. So I spent most of my teenage years and in my 20s really suffering from anxiety. Because what would happen is, even though I shut down the entire communication, they were still trying to do what I was made to do, which was to be this. And when you stop something, I suffered from migraines, breast issues, oh, horrible stomach ulcers. Like my body was blown out because I had stopped the flow of what and who I was supposed to be. So it wasn't until I had an accident at 33, which is what the book is about, Erasable. And then I started leaning into it a little bit, but it wasn't until I turned 42 and I moved to Asheville, North Carolina, that because I wasn't with my ex of 18 years who was religious but not spiritual. So my mother had died. So that was out of the picture. And he was very similar to her. And he was out of the picture. I purchased a rundown motel in near Asheville with a friend. And she was gone most of the time because she worked for the airline business. And I had no idea that the place that we bought had a history of being a reform camp for girls that behaved bad like 30 years prior to me being there. And I had only 2 bedrooms upstairs, and I had my teenagers up there. And I took this bedroom down in the bottom, which was like a cellar. I mean, it was basement. And for the first few months of me being there, I would start seeing these young girls run in the cement. And they would say to me, help me, help me, help me. I couldn't sleep. I was overwhelmed because I didn't know what was happening to me. I was going back to that very beginning of seeing things, but in my mind, this is not this something's wrong. I ended up going to a therapist, and I wanted her to test me to see if I was schizophrenic because I couldn't understand. I didn't want it. It went from nothing to now everything was open. I would have um, dead people come into my room before their loved ones would check in. In other words, I was getting a flood. Like all of a sudden, they just in that other realm, they said, "Oh, by the way, just go to this crazy lady's house, and before your loved ones come, she'll give them the message." And I would have these entities coming in, and then I didn't know who they belonged to. And when somebody would check in, they would stand right next to them, and I had a message for them. It was overwhelming, and that is when I decided that if I had to be living authentically, that I had to also honor that I had this gift. And anytime somebody would say to me, "What a gift," I was like, "A gift you can get back. I can't get rid of this." I mean, I didn't want to be put on antidepressants because I had tried it and it didn't do anything. You know, we avoid who we are sometimes. It doesn't matter what it is. And the injustice that we do to our bodies, because we think that, okay, we won't do this. But what happens is that the rest of your body, you know, the issues in the tissue, so the rest of your body is constantly depleted because the energy that you're stopping from whatever it is, whether it's artistic gifts or musical gifts or whatever, you're not doing what you're here to do. And it was like all of a sudden, everything in my life started to make sense. But at age, I was about to be 45, I was under a lot of stress, and it was a lot. And it was a period of time where one of my daughters that I adopted from Romania had just had a baby. And I knew that that baby, I would be raising her. So I have both of her first two children that I'm raising now alone. And I ended up in the hospital with, I flatlined. I went from looking like I had a heart attack to then, it was like a stroke. I couldn't even talk. And then in a moment, I left. And it was a very short period of time. It was not even minutes, but where I went and what the gifts I came back with were extraordinary. Because at that moment, I realized that there was nothing ever that I needed to be afraid of. And that's where my entire life shifted. And a few months later, I did end up with my granddaughter, and she's been with me for 9 years, and her little brother too. And my whole life, I am so blessed to have the gifts that I do. If you would have asked me 10 years ago, that would not have been my answer. So it's been a beautiful journey. And the reason I opened up my company as Sacred Journey, because I really think that we are all on a sacred journey. But I specifically had to really walk and talk the sacred journey of trusting that I'm not crazy. I might be off sometimes, but I'm not crazy. And I find that the more authentic you are with people, they're able to also tune in and use their intuition, because we've been brought up that this is not good. This is not, who you're supposed to be. So that's where my story, that's where I ended up becoming who I am today.
Well, so much in that, Millie. I think that's incredibly important, and gosh, so many pieces on that I would like to touch back on. I think I know what I've kind of seen, even just like clinically, is what I think creates the most suffering for people is when they're really out of alignment with who they are. It's like the body just keeps screaming the messages over and over and over again, and they usually just get louder and more uncomfortable. And you might find a way to kind of try and push it off to the side a little bit, or we kind of dip our toes in a little bit. But it's a totally different game when you really, I think, really understand that that's what's going on, and then you just go in. You're just like, okay, I'm all in. And sometimes I think you have to hit those really, really intense challenges where you just decide, okay, I'm done, and you really start to become authentic. And I love that you said that the intuition, because I think like all of us have this deep sense of intuition, and what gets in the way of it is when we are not operating from our authentic self. It's like when we're doing things that we, maybe here we're trying to rationalize, and in the heart we kind of know that it's not quite right, but we're doing it anyways. I think when you get out of alignment like that, you can't connect so wholeheartedly back to that intuition because you're not operating in the world like that. So it's such a tricky one because
Or you're
it's,
told
well,
by an outside
sure.
authority, whether it be your parents or whether
Mm-hmm.
it be the school or whether it be your government. I mean, we're seeing that play out really clearly right now. So you're disconnected more and more from, and it comes up as confusion and doubt.
Yeah, a lot of
And
times that is usually how it surfaces. For you, for people that are going through that, because I think a lot of people that are listening to this right now get that. I think there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of, and I think where we are right now is a lot of people are kind of getting to the point where they're almost sick of it. Like they're
Mm-hmm.
recognizing that pattern's going on, or things are getting hard enough that they're really just wanting to make a change. How do you support people when they are in the world in a certain way, and usually their life is tied in so many different pieces, and they know that when they make that change, it's not always just this smooth transition. How do you assist people and maybe, yeah, help them sort of understand what that process can even be like?
You know, I had, I'll never forget, which is very ironic. My godmother in Puerto Rico, bless her heart, she was a spiritualist. And my mother went to her for anything that required, any good juju. She was just incredible. She was psychic. She was into herbs. I mean, she had a room in her house which was all candles and incense, and it was very much like practical magic type of thing. It was just, she was amazing. And I remember she said to me in one of those moments when my mother was so frustrated with me because it was happening everywhere. I was talking in the car to people that weren't there, and she said to me, and this was back in the early 70s, she said, don't share with your mother what you see. The world's not ready yet, but don't block it. Don't stump yourself from that growth. I didn't understand what she was saying. It was either black or white. There was no in between here. I feel that, first of all, what's happening now, because we have undergone some massive upgrades just in the last 3 years. DNA upgrades, energetically. There's been a cosmic mass shift in society. So what people, because of religion, because of politics, because of whatever belief system that they have stumped their growth spiritually because, for years, how many witches weren't burned? You know what I mean? How many people weren't prosecuted for it? But when I sit with somebody now I get a lot of Christian people, which is amazing to me because I'm reading tarot but I speak to them in their lingo. I'll speak to them in, Christ consciousness. I will sit with anyone. At the end of the day, the subject is exactly the same. It's just a different lingo or a different language that I'm using. I feel that people are more open to it. And if somebody's watching this show or listening to this show, it's not by mistake, number one. Number two, they're interested in something that's their soul is asking them, knocking on their door and saying, hey, it's time that you wake up. So everybody has the speed in which they do wake up. It took me 40 something years. I see my children, I'm sure you see yours, they're open like that. I mean, everything it's mainstream. So what I say to my clients when I'll sit with them and I'll say to them something that I know it's going to touch them, but they have no knowledge, I'll say, you're not from here. You're very galactic. Now, when you sit and you tell somebody who doesn't have an awareness that there is other dimensions or there is other levels of consciousness and there's other realms, that you're not from here, you see their face go, what? And then I'll say to them, you are this. Does that resonate? And all of a sudden, it's like the world has just opened them up to some new information to figure out why they are the way they are. So thank God that technology is a double-edged sword. It gives us a lot of information, sometimes not the right information, but it also it gives us too much of sometimes things that are not really true. You have to decipher. So what I say to people when they do come to me, and especially people that I start seeing, I do work with a lot of trauma, childhood trauma. Like I could be in a reading and in the middle of saying something, I'll say to them, what happened to you at the age of 2 or 3? And it happens so much. And they'll immediately, share something, or they'll come back in a week and say, I've given it a thought. I go, you don't have to know what happened, but you have to know that something back there needs to be shifted because it's made you believe that you are this. And you can shift that. You can shift the entire programming. We can reprogram ourselves at any given time. I really think that I don't find it as difficult anymore as I did 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. People are not as close-minded, or they're not as sheltering or scared to come out and say, oh, by the way, I receive light language codes, or by the way, I can see what's happening in somebody else's house because I just know, or I could sit next to somebody on a bus and I know exactly what they're thinking. It happens more than not. I'm just saying that when I see people, I am aware that there's an expansion, there's an awareness that just the last 3 years.
Mhm.
You know, that pandemic, as it might sound harsh, but it was a major gift for society and for the collective. It needed to happen. We needed to be put in timeout in order for us to really grow. And as many lives have gone on to the next level of existence, I also feel that it allowed us to start thinking for ourselves, a lot of us, where we go, something here is not, it's not right. It's more to this life than just what we've been told and taught to believe. So with that said, I really feel that I don't have that problem with people as they used to. I mean, there might be a few things that if you say to them, they're like, what? But when they go back within time, I'll always hear back from them and they're like, this has been happening to me since I was a kid, but I didn't think it was this. So I just feel people are a lot more aware than they believe they are. I mean, it just takes a little knock on their back here and their consciousness to say, oh my God, there's more to this. So yeah.
Mhm.
It's interesting because I know that for us personally, the last 3 to 5 years has been, we've noticed firsthand what a major shift that we've been experiencing and feeling and tapping into. And even the superpowers that have come online as far as heightened intuition and psychic abilities. And oftentimes we start talking about something and then like, oh, I was just on that topic within my mind. So that's a common occurrence between the two of us as well. And the ideas that come forth, and as far as we were talking earlier before recording, the theme of the series and the type of conversations that we want to have, these have oftentimes been inspired not through the intellect, but they'll just literally land. And we'll go ahead and execute them, and all the pieces will kind of harmoniously, easily come and fit together. When you, Millie, speak of waking up,
That was my question.
of course. Well, can you break that down for people? What do you mean by waking up? What are we waking up from, and what are we waking up to?
When I say waking up, I mean like the veil of what I thought my reality was no longer the same. It was like somebody had taken the blinders off of me and I went, wait, what? I started to question everything. And one of the things that happened, I have a friend who, when she said that when she woke up like 10, 15 years ago, she wanted to bring everyone and wake them up. I was very upset that they weren't on the same page as she was because she couldn't understand why people just, I'm like, I never had that. I decided that I must be going crazy. I'm seeing things that are not there. I'm not going to go announce that to anybody. It's like my own. I'm going to take care of this on my own. But what happened was that I actually started feeling into my body. I would recognize a feeling rather than, I mean, it wasn't just, okay, I could hear a voice or I could hear a thought, but the awakening process happens is unique to every single person. It could be, that they could see colors, hear colors or feel colors. Now, when I had my near-death experience, one of the things that I came back with was that I could actually feel colors. I could hear their sound. Like green to me was my favorite because it was very earthy and it felt almost like, if you ever hear harps, like Celtic harps, it felt like somebody was just playing Celtic harps. And it was the middle of winter and there was snow on the ground. And it was like, I could just feel the earth trying to play that. I couldn't wear black. I couldn't wear red. I couldn't wear orange. In other words, the bottom chakras were completely blocked. There were colors that I couldn't, I hated the color yellow growing up. I don't know what it was about yellow, but it became one of my favorite colors because it was so fun and it was easy. And blue felt like you were going into like you were just mesmerized with peace and tranquility. I don't have that anymore. That was just one of those big things that happened when I did wake up. I could feel things, and I could hear the weather, which was, I could say, okay, it's going to rain today, and there was no rain in the forecast. And my ex-husband would say to me, oh yeah, because now you're a meteorologist. And like an hour later, it would start raining in the mountains. And I'm like, I told you. I mean, it was because I got out of the way. When you awaken, that's one of the things that I always tell people, okay, this is going to be fun. And they're like, this is not going to be fun. I go, it might be painful sometimes because you're programming, because we're programmed to believe by our experiences, our upbringing, our culture, that this is the way that you're supposed to be. And then all of a sudden you realize, no, this is not the way I'm supposed to be. But the awakening is more like waking up from a slumber, from an idea, from a programming that you're no longer. It's like waking up in the Matrix. Like that movie was a documentary where you go, oh my God, there's more to this than what meets the eye. So I always tell people, like, just be gentle with you. Don't be so judgmental. We tend to judge ourselves harder than we judge anybody else because they're not experiencing this, or they don't have an idea what you're going through. I feel that when you start waking up spiritually, the first thing you need to do is be gentle with yourself and recognize that you're there, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. There's no mistake. Everything is timing. And maybe you weren't ready a year ago. Maybe you weren't ready decades ago. But here we are. And I also feel that the reason that people are awakening is because the energies, cosmic energies, are so much more intense now than they were 4 years ago, 3 years ago. And because it is as a collective, we are more aware. That is like a pull that's just pushing us to raise the vibration and really meet ourselves there, where before, everything was hush hush. Nobody wanted to talk about this. So that's where I think awakening, it's like, I don't know. Have you ever had a dream and when you wake up, you don't know where you are or what day it is? Have you ever had one of those dreams where you're completely disoriented, right? That's what the awakening process feels like. And for everybody, it either comes because they were meant to wake up way before they did, but they had an accident. They could have had a walk-in. They could have had a near-death experience. They had some traumatic injury that gets you out of the way, and you have to trust. Because part of the awakening process is you really have to trust in something that's not there. And it's called faith. In whatever religion, it's belief and faith. So once you get out of the way, you're allowed to experience life in a very different manner.
Yeah. Yeah, well said, Millie. We often talk about faith and trust because it is in sort of this, that you're held, and that you're moving beyond trying to rationally understand and use the logical linear mind, which is what usually we've been using for so long to make it through our path. And you're essentially tapping into something that you can't always see, but you can feel, and you have a different sense of informing what is the right decision for you at that moment in time, and being aware of it and letting the spontaneity of your personal instructions arise moment to moment and guide you. It's such a different approach than trying to plan your 10-year life plan, realizing that it just doesn't work like that. So, you might have a feeling of what you're wanting your life to kind of move towards, but then really dialing into that moment to moment. And it just doesn't make sense for a lot of people because it's not the way we're used to doing it. But like you said, I think more and more people are finding that actually feels a lot more rewarding to them, and it feels more like they're operating as themselves more, right? So I think in that is sort of the almost the motivation to keep doing it, because you feel more and more like yourself. And generally, I would say your life actually navigates really well the more we listen to that. And I was just having this conversation the other day. It's like this idea, as human beings, is like we're so wanting to keep things within an okay zone where everything is just
Controlled.
stable, controlled, secure. It's totally trying to avoid the pleasure pain cycles, and just stay in this. And I said, it's just not the way nature goes. Like, you just don't. It's really ebbs and flows. And I mean, it can even ebb and flow in like extremes and bounce back. And it's really like one of our teachers before used to say, it's not about sort of staying in that sweet spot all the time. It's like, can you be okay when the rug's been pulled up from underneath you? And that's really requires this faith and this trust and this ability to be able to connect back to something so real that you don't question it anymore, and let that be your compass.
And I believe that the magic, the mysticism of life happens in the discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
When you're comfortable, you don't make any changes in your life. Why would you? There's no reason for it. So one of the things that spirituality does, especially as you're awakening to this process of trusting and believing in what you can't see, is that it feels very uncomfortable. It feels like you said, like the rug has been pulled from under you. I feel that that's the most magical space to be, because that's where you're either go or don't, but you're going to have to make a decision. I had something happen to me this week that, just when I think that I have all the answers to my spirituality. So the love of my life, one of the greatest loves of my life, he died when we were both about to turn 25, 30 years ago. And his death anniversary was last Tuesday, not this one, but on the 14th. And, I got busy. I celebrated that day, his life. And, he and I were together in Miami, Florida, but his body was sent to Warrior, Alabama. And the entire weekend after my kids left, I kept hearing the voice, you have to go to Warrior, Alabama. Go to Warrior, Alabama? What for? I mean, he's with me all the time. Why do I need to go to his gravesite? You know what I mean? So the voice got really strong, and it didn't feel so much like it was him as the counsel that talks to me. Like, it kept showing up in things that I would read, like the word warrior, music, reels. I was like, okay, I got it. So Monday I decided, let's see how far this Warrior, Alabama is from Asheville, North Carolina. And it's 6 hours. And I thought, okay, I could do it. I mean, I had no plan. I had no idea why I needed to go. Got in my car on Tuesday, drove the 6 hours. Couldn't remember, because I had a head injury after that. I couldn't remember. I knew it was a Catholic church. I couldn't remember where he was buried. Found the church, found his gravesite, and I'm standing there in the cold. Okay, dude, I'm here. I don't know why I'm supposed to be here. I can't remember your mother's last name. I knew her first name, couldn't remember her last name. And I knew that maybe one of the reasons that I needed to be there was to actually reach out to her. As I'm walking away about 10 feet from his site, there was a little plaque with her last name on it, just the last name. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh my God, that's it. So I got in my car, I got on my phone, I started looking, and yes, there was a woman in her 80s living in the town still, but no address. So I thought, okay, I'm here. I'm gonna go to City Hall. I mean, I got nothing to lose. I got to City Hall. The chief of the fire department helped me. And because it is a small town, they gave me the information, where a big town won't even give you that. Like, yeah, go down the road, giving me those, when you see the cow on there that's always sitting, just make a laugh, and I'm laughing. I'm like, okay. I go, and he gives me 2 addresses. I knock on the first one. It wasn't that. Knocked on the second one. I couldn't knock. Actually, I had to sit out there for like 15, 20 minutes because it was gated. And I'm like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm just going to wait for whoever's in that house to come out. And the woman came out with her dogs. And I said, does so-and-so live here? Oh yeah, they live up the road. I made it to the woman's house. I saw her last name on the door, and she opened up. She's 80 years old. She was on a walker. And the moment that I saw her, I was like, I don't know if you remember me. And I told her my name, and she said, yeah, you were the love of his life. Of course I remember you. And she goes, did you come all the way from Miami? I'm like, no, I live in Asheville. She goes, that's like 7 hours. And I go, 6. She goes, why did you come? I go, I don't really know. I have no idea. So then she said to me, this is where you know that spirit has magic. On Tuesday, I was sitting here on his death anniversary, and I felt very disconnected from my son after 30 years. And I said to him, if you're really with me and you hear my prayers, I would really love for you to send an angel to my door. I'm no angel, but I listen. And I knew at that moment that she got, as a mother, the confirmation after 30 years that her son was very much with her. Now, I drove back another 6 hours home. How did that change me? Why did I do it? Because sometimes, and I say this a lot to people, trust your intuition is not always about you. It's about the connection that you're making along the way. Our spirituality is not about egotistical or egomaniac or whatever it is, that it's not about me. I go through a period of time that has nothing to do with me, and I can be at a store and give a message to somebody. I might never see that person 2 minutes later. But part of us is that we think that we have this idea that spirituality is this or that. And the reality is very subtle. And we are meant to listen, but we're so caught up in our heads and our what we think we need to do that we don't take the time to even just stop this for 5 minutes and really listen. We're always being told. How many times have you been at a light and you don't go immediately and you see a car crash, or something stopped you from getting into a car crash like 2 minutes before? It happens around us all the time. And if you start to pay attention, you realize how connected we are to each other and to spirit. And that's one of the many things that happen when you finally let go of the idea of this. I mean, we're having a human experience, but we're all spiritual beings. And it's beautiful when I experience something as powerful as trusting to drive 6 hours each way without a single map of why am I here. I've learned after my near-death experience to not question. As crazy as it might sound, I'm like, okay, I guess I'm going on an adventure today. And this happens a lot. I just show up. And when you live your life trusting and believing that you're always being held by spirit, your life changes. It doesn't make it easy, because a lot of times I don't want to do what I'm being told to do. Heck no. But when you do, there's this ease and flow of your heart just expands. Everything about you just changes. You become humbled by the experiences. It's like another layer of the onion just shedding, and you're going, wow, okay, I'm going to trust more. I mean, after that, I was like, okay, I know you've been telling me this other thing and I haven't been listening. I'm going to listen now. I'm going to really listen, because I have to. There's no other way of living. So yeah, that was pretty cool this week.
Wow, that is beautiful.
That was probably one of the most beautiful ways I've heard that explained. And I love that it tied it back, that intuition is not always about you. And that's so true. And it's like, I think that's probably one of the biggest blocks that gets in the way, is that
and that's happened a few times, I feel like, this past little while for us as well.
Yeah.
In that certain people, some after over 10 years will randomly, not so randomly, pop back into our lives for something minor, and after kind of stepping back, you realize, oh, okay, that wasn't for me personally, that was for them. And it's beautiful, because when you start to see that we are all pieces of this grand puzzle, and we're all needed here for that reason. There was a conversation, well, there was a course that we're taking with one of our dear friends and metaphysical teachers as well, RJ Spina, and he had talked about 2023 being a very important year that humanity is moving through, and how we're ultimately going to be choosing our path that is going to then, decide our fate for the next 100 years. And somebody had asked him in the group, well, how are we to show up? What are we supposed to do? And he just very plainly said, be yourself. And it's that part is really essential, I feel like, because the world that we're in right now, and the level of programming we are all receiving from all sides, is telling us to be a particular way. It's telling us, this is good, this is bad. Be kind, don't be angry, don't show aggression. And so we're constantly trying to navigate our lives and see ourselves through the lens of an exterior authority outside of us. And through that judging of ourselves and hence others, which is a natural extension of that, we can't even know or begin to feel back into who we really are. And I feel like these conversations that we're having and these series that are being held, we're constantly encouraging people to get to know yourself, know thyself, get back to who you are, get back to your intuition, get back to your soul compass. What are you feeling? What are you sensing? What are the synchronicities within your life pointing you to? And it's essentially coming back so that you can harness and gather in and be within the wholeness of who you are so that you can contribute your magnificent and unique puzzle into that grand puzzle so that we can in that process also assist each other in getting to know ourselves that much more clearly.
Mm.
God,
Yeah.
you're so beautiful. That is so beautiful. I mean, you can't say it any more exquisitely. That is, yeah, that's just beautiful.
But I
And
think your story pointed that out so clearly as well. It's you had no idea why you were driving for 6 hours, like 12 hours back and
no,
forth. And it
yeah,
was for that mother to know that there is a reality well beyond this one in which her son is residing within and is also able to connect with her on that level and vice versa.
it was so funny because I was coming back and I was stuck in traffic for an hour by Chattanooga, Tennessee. And I have this playlist that's only Spanish music. There's no American music. It's all no English. It's just Spanish. And I said out loud, "Hey, dude, I did this for you. You know, I've been struggling with this other subject. I would really appreciate if you give me just a little heads up of what's going to happen." Mid song, because I was still jamming in the back, mid song, he changed it to another American song. And the lyrics in the song said exactly what I needed to hear. And I just sobbed and I went, "I got it. Thank you. I got you." And it's that kind of like, I feel that because I'm so open and my antenna is just a little clear. Everybody has an antenna. They have their antennas. It's just that I don't have that static. The only difference between me and somebody who is not awakened is just the fact, first of all, awareness, and second of all, I kind of clear out the antennas. I don't censor what's coming in. I might not always like it. I'm going to be honest with you. One of the things that spirituality, walking the spiritual walk, is that there's a lot of struggles along the way because you're aware of this human suffering. It's not all, "Oh, I'm going to ride a unicorn and I'm going to be meeting fairies." It doesn't happen that way. The higher you go on the level of consciousness, the more difficult things get because the lessons become harder. They're no longer easy lessons. The higher you go, the more challenges you're going to find. And that is part of why we're here. This is a classroom. This life is a classroom. And when you recognize that you're just leveling up like a game. I mean, all those games that kids play, they go from one easy level into a harder level. And that's exactly what life is. So, of course, I would like to just shut everything down and go, "You know what? I just want to be ignorant like everybody else. I'm okay with that. I don't want to play this game." But the reality is that that's not what I came here to do. That's not what you guys came here to do. And that's what no one here came to do. So when you start seeing it as a game and you realize, okay, I finished that, let me level up to the next one, you never know what you're going to find. There's going to be beautiful things in the midst of not so much beauty. I mean, there really is.
Yeah. One thing that I think is really important with that too is it's like even in the games, it's like you never are put into the level that you can't actually have the skill set to handle. So it's like when we go through that, you're leveling up, but it's like it's going to be harder, but you've also acquired what's required to move you through that level. So I mean, and you think about how much fun that is when you're playing a game doing that. You know, if we can kind of take that concept, I like that concept because I think it really, there's actually so many concepts like that where I feel like we've overlaid an aspect of sort of
The greater reality.
of technology and different things that sort of actually are very much like I think what happens in the metaphysics, but it's like this overlay. It's really interesting. But yeah, I think that's a great way to approach it too.
And we have, I feel like, done that too as well. I mean, it is so much easier to to kind of step back. It helps with the non-attachment aspect of, if we are light beings, spark of infinity, fractals of God or source, and we're here within this realm to experience and explore and learn and evolve, and see how we can conduct aspects of ourselves here within this realm, being so far away from our source. If we can see it all as a game, it really assists, I know personally, it really assists me to kind of make some choices that I might not necessarily would otherwise.
I agree. I mean, I'm not a game player, or, I don't, but I understand the attraction of just disappearing from this for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And if you start seeing that your life is that game, in spite of all the challenges and the struggles, and you trust, because in the game, you trust that where you're going, you're going to get to where you are. I mean, you might die along the way, but then you start all over again, right? So if you start seeing your life as this incredible game, you would take more chances, because the reality is that we're infinite beings. I mean, the costume might change, the persona might change, but you're going to pop right back. I mean, in my belief system, and do it all over again if you want to. So you don't stop from pursuing those dreams that seem so difficult. It's all, and it's also the rules and regulations and the way that we've been programmed. Let's just be clear. A lot of what we are and who we are is because we've been told we need to be one way.
Mm-hmm.
And when you delete that and see it, I'm going to play the game, I'm going to play it a little bit different. You just have to take those chances and trust that you're always going to be held by something larger than yourself.
Yeah.
Millie, when you flatlined, what happened?
I went to this room. You've seen The Matrix? Okay. Do you remember the room, the white room where he meets the architect?
Yeah.
And it was all white, and you can't tell the difference between a ceiling, the ground, or whatever. I was in that room, and I felt immediately the sense of, I knew I was dead. I knew that where I wasn't, I mean, it was immediate. I was like, okay, I'm not in Kansas anymore. I'm not alive. And I heard these sounds coming from far off, but because it's white and you can't tell the dimension of what you're doing or where you are at. It was like I didn't have a ground to step on, but it was this exquisite white, like, and this lack of fear. All of a sudden, anything anxiety or fear that I've ever had, it went away. And I've not been there. I mean, I can have moments of that in meditation, but I've never been able to just be that free to really just be and not have to. And I'm sorry, I get very emotional because it was the most intense feeling of just existing without really existing. And I heard my father, who was not very present in my life, he said to me in Spanish, he showed up, and I'm like, oh, look at you. and he said, you got to go back for the kids. I'm like, no, my kids are all grown up, because the 6 that I had before, the youngest was 18, she was finishing, and I was like, no, I'm done. And he said, no, the kids need you. And little did I know that I would end up with 2 more. So I remember I wanted to push him out of the way just so I can go, because the peace that I found. And then I heard a voice, a very clear voice, say to me, we had to get you out of the way for your next level. And at that moment, he said, I'll see you sometime, baby girl. And I was pulled right back into my body. And I remember the first moment of waking up, I saw my ex-husband, and the saliva from just taking a breath, it was like being born again. I've never felt the drain when I went to the bathroom, just feeling it come out. The first kiss that I got from him felt like I have never experienced for, like, I don't know, maybe it was about 3 months. When I would wake up in the morning, it felt like my soul was out of my body and I couldn't quite fit it back into this physical part. So it was intense. I did not want to be here. There were several people that were worried, and they found a therapist for me, because there were moments that I wanted to check out, because I was like, why do I want to go? I saw what I experienced. I don't want to be here. And it took a lot of me to just recognize that I wasn't done yet. And that's what happens with a lot of people who have near-death experiences. They come back different, because the reality of where they saw, and you know what, we can go through the whole medical thing that your brain stops, the oxygen in your brain stops, and you're just having a delusion, or you're having whatever it is, you experience what you experience. Well, however they want to, analyze it, or try to dissect it, I was never again the same. And there are moments where I forget that, and I'll go into meditation and I'll get a little bit of that piece, and I go, okay, I'm okay. I know where I'm going. Because I'm not afraid of dying. Most people let's be clear. We are born, and the journey is to death. You can't avoid it. If you think about it, like, okay, that's where we're going. We're all going there, and we don't know the expiration date, but we know that that's where we're going. When you accept that this is a journey, and that you're learning, and that every person that you come in contact with is either a teacher or a student, you recognize that, okay, you're going to play your part, just like that game. You're never the same. And maybe there are people that have had to die several times to get it, and then they come back and they're like, okay, I got to make some changes. I came in with one foot in here and another foot out. I was a very sick child. I was in and out of hospitals. I did not want to be here. I had a regression when I was in my mother's stomach, and I said, well, if she doesn't have a C-section, I don't have to come in. And she had an emergency C-section like 2 weeks before I was born. So I was very much aware that I needed this human experience, but I didn't want to come. And where I am now is that I am accepting every part of every lesson and every experience in a way that, had I not had that near-death experience, I would never be where I am today. It woke me up, literally woke me up from this fear of, and it wasn't so much death. I just felt like I wasn't doing enough to make this life count. I wasn't being enough to make this life. You kind of like chill out and go, yeah, I'm doing the best I can. There's nothing else. This is who I am, and I'm not going, the anxiety kind of left. I have moments of anxiety, but not that fear of, oh, if I do this, what's going to happen to me? That's gone. And I don't want people to die and come back just so they can experience that. I feel you can do it by just truly acknowledging who you are and accepting every bit of why you're here. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Millie, when you've worked with people over the years, have you seen any common messages that loved ones from the other side come back that want to share with the person that's there? Are you seeing any messages that are almost coming up as like, wow, there's a theme here that people need to hear this?
The most incredible theme that I see is all about forgiveness. People don't want you to forgive them for what they did. They want you to forgive yourself, and to love yourself. I get this so much when they're coming in. They're like, they want you to forgive them, but they also want you to forgive yourself for not knowing any better, because you beat yourself up for that. Forgiveness keeps us not forgiving ourselves for the lessons, for the experience, for the participation in this thing called life. It actually lowers your vibration. And what the majority of dead people want is, they want them to know, first of all, that they're okay, that where they're at, they're better than ever. And a lot of times it's all about, letting them know that they're sorry for whatever they did. And then the next thing is, please forgive yourself. It's okay. Forgiveness and love are the two major, because once you take the ego out of the way, there's no, I did this or I didn't do this. There's that's who we are. What is the number one thing that we're here to do? Aside from learning, is to love. And we tie that up to our loved ones. And grief is an inexplicable teacher. we get stuck in the memories of who that person was and what they were and what they meant. And then there's all this resentment and this, I can't believe that I didn't get to. They see it. Hey, I was sent to Warrior, Alabama just for trusting. I mean, they're very clear. They're always with you. And so forgiveness is the number one. It's those regrets that people have, that when they're on the other side, they just want to shake their loved ones and say, it's okay. You can let go. There's nothing to forgive. Just forgive yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that in itself is enough to kind of change the course direction of your life for the rest of it. Millie, what for this book, Erasable, that is out now, what would you really hope to share with people from the purpose? I mean, this book was kind of like a 20-year in making, I think you had mentioned. So from people that are going, I was telling you at the beginning here that when I started reading it, I mean, it is a kickstart off for a book. I mean, I was glued to the pages for the first bit, just trying to what is going on, trying to figure out what's happening. So I think, I mean, it's a really beautiful, powerful story. What's your intention with it? What are you hoping people that are going to read it will take from it?
You can overcome anything, even the hardest things, even if you take them apart and do them little by little. It might take you 20 years. It might take you 30. It might take you 5. Be persistent and be honest with yourself and follow your dreams. You know, the book took me 20 years because I wrote it when I had the accident and I left it on a computer. And so I wasn't ready until not even a year ago to really examine it again and then finish it off. But if anything, it's just a journey. We all have a story. There's no one here on earth that doesn't have one incredible story. Every single person has an amazing story. The only difference with me is that I jotted it down. I wrote it. But every single person has an amazing story. And I feel that the reason we read books or watch movies or listen to podcasts or whatever is that we want to know that somebody else experienced something similar. That's why we do it. Oh my God, that person had something similar that I did, or to learn from it. No journey is perfect. And as long as you just keep putting one foot in front of the other, you could overcome anything, whether it's a health crisis or the loss of somebody that you loved, or losing everything financially or whatever. I mean, everybody's story is different. And we come here with a set of lessons that we have to learn, and because we picked them before we got here. And that's how my story, I mean, if anything, that's what I would love, that when you read it, you go, she did it, I can do it too. I mean, that's basically it. That's why we read stories and go to movies.
Mm-hmm. Millie, from your experience of sort of across the veil and whatnot, is there any big insights that you came to around things like health and healing, particularly as far as what sort of really navigates how we get ill and how we can actually heal ourselves?
I get people that are going through cancer, and depending on where they're at, and a lot of times I'll gently say to them, like, let's say they have prostate cancer. Say, okay, what shame and guilt have you been holding on to your masculinity? I mean, every part of our body is attached to an emotional outcome or an emotion or a memory or something. I'm not saying that sometimes it's genetic, and there are people that are, but the majority of the times that we have something is a powerful lesson for us to learn our strength, endurance, our tenacity. And if you don't get it and you fall into and I hate to use this because I get slack out of this. If you fall into the victim mode, why is this happening to me? You can't process or even heal until you take accountability that a lot of what happens to ourselves is induced by the choices we make in our lives, the stress that we have, and whatever else is around us. So it doesn't mean that you're going to completely heal. You're going to have to use, whether you do chemo or radiation or whatever. If you do not come to the emotional part of that illness, it's going to show up in a different manner. Because, like I said before, the issue is in the tissue. What is storing in there? What is happening in there that, I remember in my 20s, I found Louise Hayes. And she had just started with, working with AIDS patients. And I remember I had all these massive breast issues, and I started reading her stuff. And I associated my breast issues to my mother. When my mother died and I left my ex, I have never had another breast issue ever again. That part of my life was tied up to those self-worth issues and the mothering issues. And the same, with anything else that I've had, cyst or whatever. I stump my toe and I will come to my desk, and I this is my Bible. It's just like Louise Hayes. And I will come and look, what is my big toe trying to tell me now? It's that simple. I will, and I have an ingrown toenail, and I'm like, why is my toe hurting so much? And as soon as I sit in meditation, doesn't mean that it disappears immediately, but being aware of what your body's trying to tell you is huge.
Yeah, I love it. It's what I've found over probably 25 years in healthcare now has been very much the same thing. At the root of it, I think most of the stuff starts up there. It really is like that sort of vital body energetic blueprint that affects everything back down from it. And I agree. Sometimes I think things can happen that are maybe not so much that, but even that, I think there's still layers above that probably supersede it.
It's hard for people to hear that, though. If they're in their grief because they're losing something or something happened and they don't know how they're going to overcome this, it's hard for them initially to even take accountability that they also can heal this by tuning in and really, and a lot of times it's so subtle. It's something that's happened way back there, and it created stress, which will kill you. It will create, if you have an addiction and, you drink yourself to death and then you wonder why you have all these issues. I mean, we impose a lot of our issues, our health issues, because of our lifestyle and how we approach things. That doesn't mean, every time I say, I might get something, I'm like, nope, I cancel that. I don't know. I don't know what tomorrow might bring, but where I am today, I know that if something happens to me, I have to take accountability and go, what is this teaching me? Mm-hmm. Why am I having to do this? Why did I have to get my uterus removed? Why did I get hit in the back of the head and lost half of my memories from, 33 and back? In other words, I know now when I sit back, what that was trying to teach me. People that come out of illnesses like this will say, wow, what the cancer really brought me was. And it's powerful. I have clients that have overcome major illnesses. And when I say, what did you learn? And they'll immediately go, I learned this. And I don't live my life like that anymore. So it's a powerful teacher. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think the trickiest part is that a lot of times when we think about taking accountability for it, it turns into like judging ourselves as good or bad or something. And if we can get that out of the way and sort of more look at it with curiosity and sort of just like, I've recently had to do this with something, because stuff always comes up. You can't be in the world without stuff coming up. Sometimes it's more yours, sometimes it's connected with other people. It can be a whole mix of things, but I like the process of sitting and literally going into that body part and kind of nurturing it and just asking what's going on. There's something around that I find really, I find it really nurturing, and I usually find like you get a really clear answer if you can slow things down enough and really genuinely want to connect in, and then act on it. Then I think then you have to sort of decide what you want to do with that information, or at least let it process and let it clear. And how I think of it is then like, all of those things that we talk about with either chakras or meridians or all these things, all of a sudden they start to run more smooth again. You break up that stagnation or that blockage that's in that area, and all of a sudden that starts to run. And now you're feeding those channels and those organ systems all a lot more. Yeah. And naturally, and it's a natural process. It wants to be back to that. So
my mother used to say my mother always said that she was going to die of cancer. She was a hypochondriac. She was always in the doctors. And because I lived with that, I avoid going to the doctor. If I have something that I could fix on my own, I will. I can't. And when she got cancer, you would have thought she was given a prize. She said, I told you I was going to die of cancer. I go, Mom, you've been asking for cancer for 80 something years. Of course you're going to die of cancer. Let's be real. You keep calling it in. and we are magnets to everything around us. You don't think you're going to, no, that's not the way it works. Okay. So she died exactly how she thought she was going to die.
Mm-hmm. Millie, as we come up on time here, is there any final words you would like to leave with our viewers before we finish up?
First of all, I want to thank both of you for having me on. You guys are delightful, and you're making such an incredible wave in the collective with all that you're doing. And second of all, I think that the most important thing here is to really trust your intuition, to really move inward and have a practice every day, whether it's to light an incense and just sit there for a few minutes, or meditate for a few minutes, or be mindful to be in nature. As we are moving through these incredible times that I'm excited to see what comes out of them, it takes all of us to really step out of our humanness and more into spirit. And I think that that's where our children are going to find it so much easier than we have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when you've got kids too, I definitely find that was a major catalyst for us when our 5 and 6-year-old, when they were born, even it was a big shakeup of just really wanting to do things in a different way. So sometimes I find that's as much as we want to do things for ourselves and get to that place, sometimes it starts with wanting to do something for somebody else, and then you step into your own strength in that process. And you mentioned the time back to intuition. We've been talking about this for pretty much since the beginning of this series, how important that is, because that's what's going to bring you back to you. And that's where you really want to take your instructions from. But we need to kind of clear that path to get there. I'll put a link for it again here, but we are giving that free meditation around the accessing your heart's wisdom. That's where we want to start to connect to. So check that out if you haven't already gotten it, but I'll put a link there. You can check it out on the website. Millie, where can people learn more about your work? Where can they download your book? And you've got several different books too, where people can learn more.
Yeah, they can go to Amazon and just put Millie America and the books will show up. And, they could also go to my site, sacredjourneyinword.com. And I also have a page, Sacred Journey in Word, on Facebook. So, they can find me. It's not about working with me. It's about really stepping. If anybody gets anything out of this, it's really just listen to that little voice that's always sending you messages, and you just shut it off and then go, I don't know why I did that. That was your GPS right there, So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Millie. We're going to have all those links below this video as well. So if anyone is interested, please check out more of Millie's work. Thank you so much. It's been
what an absolute pleasure. What a beautiful
You
conversation.
too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.